If you told me 9 years ago that we'd still be playing No Man's Sky today, I'd probably think you were joking. Yet here we are, over 30 free updates later, and it's still pumping out content. And every year, without fail, the builds that fans create get even crazier. From auto-assembling robots to orbital dreadnoughts, all the way to possibly most ambitious player city I have ever seen. And not only are we going to check all of that today, but I'm beyond excited to also say this video has been sponsored by Hello Games themselves. So totally check the links down below if you want to show your support, and let's dive right in. Coming up first, after the Stargazer Dreadnought that we covered more than 3 years ago, I thought it would be impossible to find another orbital base quite like it. Yet here we are, and we actually get one that I would say is even more ambitious and probably the most ambitious public build we have access to right now, the DCS Naze. Now this is going to be a Euclid Galaxy build, so it's much easier to reach. However, it's on a much bigger scale than the previous one. Obviously, the base is much bigger, there are many more rooms. I also have to give praises to the very creative way of using everyday base parts to give the outer shell a lot more detail. Like you will see a lot of these containers and other objects giving in a lot more detail, even silos as rocket launchers, so that looks really nice. The front part even has a laser beam that's kind of fully functional. You can obviously activate the trapdoors and kind of have that all open, but obviously it's not going to shoot since yeah, the parts over here are used for something else. Besides that, my favorite aspect of the build is the fact that there's actually a trapdoor on the lower decks that you can use to deploy your exocraft on the planet's surface. So it's not just looking great, functionality wise, it does have some pretty genius stuff. Now, if the first base was all about functionality, this second one is just for the show. So this, ladies and gents, is the Sentinel Walker, and this has only one purpose: to be the coolest landing pad you have ever seen. Basically, what this is a walker, a mechanized robot that has a landing pad on its neck, so when you land with your ship, it's going to look like as if it's currently assembling in real time. Now, obviously, this has been designed with the Interceptor aesthetic in mind, which is why Interceptor ships work the best, once again proving that Interceptors are the coolest ships in No Man's Sky. However, the more complex the Interceptor is, the cooler the final build is also going to be. Besides the fact that there are various moving parts over here taken advantage of, such as, for example, these two extractors on the side of the chest near the shoulders that kind of make it look like there are engine parts moving in real time. Besides a few others, but personally, if all of my landing pads look like this, I would probably never leave my base. Moving on to number 3, let's talk about one thing over here. No Man's Sky is kinda missing in the minigame department, and to this day I'm baffled that we have all of these exocrafts, yet no race tracks to take advantage of them. However, there is one user who took it upon themselves to go ahead and address just that. And QWin T-Bags 005, which I believe is the top builder when it comes to racetracks in No Man's Sky. There are pretty much 15 or more of these racetracks created by this builder, but unfortunately the majority of them are private, and for good reason. When lots of folks come in and place their own bases, this kind of overrides all their bases, so it tends to ruin the fun for everybody. But I was able to find one of the builds from a year ago or so, and even this, being on a smaller scale, still looked really well made. I had a ton of fun in it. You kind of have two options when it comes to exocrafts. Somehow one of them has been shrunk down, so you can use the smaller version of the exocraft as well. But I also love the genius use of teleporters over here to bring you to different levels of the racetrack. I didn't even know that they actually work when you are inside of a vehicle, so that's pretty nice, and it's a mere fraction of what this builder is capable of. That's why I kind of wish Hello Games maybe took out some of these builds and implemented them randomly on planets for us to have fun with, I don't know, maybe an exocraft re-update. I would definitely love to see that. But moving on to number 4, look, I have a lot of appreciation for fantasy builds in a tech game like this. That is why the next build kinda hits home. It's Zaratania, aka Turtle Town. It's another Azentem build, but it's basically a whole island, which is actually a turtle, on the back of which you will find a really cool small town, a miniaturized town which reminds me an awful lot of the Greek islands. I really like spending my summers over there, especially with the white buildings and the blue rooftops. But specifically here, what I appreciate is the attention to detail and the love put into every corner of the place. So you will see that every single building, even the ones you cannot enter in yourself, will have NPCs inside, or rooms that are fully decorated, kitchens, offices, and so on and so forth. So definitely just showcasing that there has been a lot of love putting into this craft, which is why this whole setup gets a high mark from me. Now moving on to number 5, obviously this will not be a proper base tour without involving some kind of orbital space station, and of course we have one over here called Orbital Colony in the Hilbert dimension. So it's a bit further away, but I will have to say I am in love with the aesthetic. It kinda gives me some Borderlands vibes over there, but once you're on the ground level and just exploring, it kinda turns into this smaller scale cyberpunk city. So I would say actually it's a combination of both of those, mostly because of the building in the middle, but there are many other smaller apartments and other building blocks you can go inside of, and a lot of them will actually feature base functions you normally expect. So it's also useful not just for the show. You will find teleporters, you will have containers here, and much more obviously, but I'm pretty sure that it slightly exceeds the base limit for me, so not all of the things have fully loaded. And also I will have to say I like that it's not just looks, functionality, but also fun. So somewhere around the middle you're going to find a racetrack, well, basically a launching pad that lets you just go with the exocraft straight into the atmosphere and down on the planet below. So if you want to have quick access and have a bit more fun, obviously this is the one for you. But moving on to number 6, look, I really like futuristic builds and even fantasy builds, but sometimes I just want something more contemporary, and that is why the next build is something that I legit copied to one of my own bases. So this is the house in the hills. It's another Euclid base that you can visit, but there are some really interesting things going on over here. First of all, this is just a contemporary luxury villa set on a planet that I believe formerly was green, but for some reason it turned orange in some of the latest updates, but it still functions very well and it takes advantage of the very relaxed weather. Specifically, you're going to notice that the swimming pool over here is just drop dead gorgeous, and it also features a jacuzzi on the side. So because there are no waves, it literally functions like a proper swimming pool. That is why I had to go ahead and copy this for my base too. But once you go inside, you do see quite a lot of stuff. A lot of the functionalities miniaturized in a way that makes it look very legit. So going here in the bed side, the bedroom features a wardrobe area, basically a miniaturized character customizer, and you can just go ahead and use it like that. I also have to say I love the treadmill setup. I've seen this being quite common, basically involving just one of the terminals plus a floor panel, and that is basically it. In the kitchen, I've noticed that they miniaturized one of the food processors to make it look like a legit oven, but it goes beyond this. So going over here in the living room setup, I really love the fact that I used some of the shop builds to make it seem as if it's an LCD screen. So unlike typical screens, this one has some animations playing in the background. Also, I'm absolutely loving these fish tanks being set up inside of the cubicle rooms. Again, just gives the whole vibe a whole nother class. And did I mention that there are some switches going on over here that you can use to turn on and off the power in the base? You can totally do that. And there's also another one outside by the entrance. However, for me personally, by far the coolest part of the base is definitely the office area. So first of all, again, very creative use of existing screens to make it look like it's a gaming setup. And guess what? It even has RGB systems you can turn on and off. How do they do that? Basically with the light floors. That is it. You have them all tied in below the desk itself, which is really cool. But besides that, you will see that a lot of the base functionalities have been miniaturized to be part of the desk. So you will see that there is even a multi-tool archive part of this for quick access. Also a save beacon as a decoration on the desk right in front of you, but there is also this bigger panel to the left side that kind of regenerates stuff like shields, HP, and so on. Also, really loving the teleport terminus setup here in the back, fully functional by the way, base, so you can quickly access any teleport location for this. And did I mention that there's also a creature display to the side? Yeah, it seems like this villa maybe belonged to Pablo Escobar at some point. But let's keep on going to number 7, and the next build has a pretty interesting gimmick, which is the fact that it's fully suspended over a naturally formed crater on an ice planet. My only wish was that we had something like this, but on a volcano planet as well. However, in the meantime, I will have to say that this build looks really interesting. Again, a lot of glitch building involved to make all of this work. That is why you're going to see a lot of these base parts being set up in a way that you normally can't unless you really know what you're doing. But again, I have to give my praises for using base parts for stuff they normally don't get used at. So for example, you will see that all of these pipelines are used to make it seem as if the whole building is suspended by a bunch of wires, because let's be honest, there's nothing below here. This whole setup is being suspended mid-air. The build itself otherwise isn't too large, it just accommodates about 4 of these landing pads, so obviously multiple folks can come in here and visit it. I will also have to say that this is one of the best uses of clutter, so it really looks organic as if it was made by Hello Games themselves. However, one thing that didn't function for me properly is being able to visit the room beneath the floor, so whenever I took the teleporter, it would just teleport me instantly below the entire base. However, if you were to pay attention here, there is actually a full-on lower deck area that seems to be fully functional. Teleporter and possibly some containers, maybe multi-tool access and whatnot, but unfortunately I just cannot see that. I even tried reducing my character size and it still didn't work, but otherwise a very awesome build if you were to fully visit it. But before we actually go to the top build of today's video, there is another one that I wanted to cover before that, and this doesn't just impress with the very cool setups as much as it does with the fact that it's a whole planet, a whole community project that features a dozen or so, if not more, amazing looking player created bases. And I'm not sure exactly who the original author of this is, because it's part of the Japanese community planet. So I'm going to go ahead and link this down below. It is a setup for Azentem. I do recommend not building any bases over here because you're just going to overwrite existing ones, but I was absolutely blown away by how many awesome builds I was able to find over here. I found a full-sized temple on the side of one of these mountains over here, and going inside, there were some pretty cool things going on. It's obviously mostly for the show, featuring throne areas and cool sceneries, but for the most part, I absolutely loved being here, kind of giving the whole island a sense of mystery, like some kind of old lost civilization that you now discovered the remnants of. Also, because this is Azentem and this is a fully lush planet, there were no bad weathers or anything, so the scenery over here and the vibe was just like out of this world, no pun intended. However, it was not the only one, so let me show you what we're working with right here. I even got to find this really cool miniaturized town, which was actually created inside of a crater. And it's also, of course, something that has a population of robots and other NPCs likewise, plus a bunch of swimming pools, taking advantage of the water over here. But I really like the fact that a lot of these houses were built with existing cubicles and structures to give it this let's just say Lego city kind of vibe. Absolutely loving it, and again, genius on the mod author. Besides that, I was able to find one of these half-opened spheres on the way. It even has a beam going from one side to another, and some glitch building being used over here to kind of give all of these animations a lot more flair. During nighttime, it looks even more spectacular because obviously you have all of these RGBs and lights and even like the universe at scale on one of its sides. So I kind of love these setups that don't really fit any function, but they just impress with the visual looks. Beyond that, I was able to find stations in the middle of the ocean, really cool, almost like museum bases with some really interesting things inside, and of course also some kind of altar to the Atlas, a biolab, and at some point even some kind of king's castle. So this is just a part of what this whole planet has to offer. Again, visit it, but try not to build anything over here. You can just set these bases as favorites and just visit them via the space stations instead. But obviously, last and definitely not least, we have the most impressive build, at least public-wise, that I have seen in the past year. It was named City Underground on Reddit, but it's actually made out of at least a couple of bases. One which includes an upper side city, but there's also a lower mining facility, which in itself also includes an underground city. So this build is one of the biggest, coolest, and most ambitious I have seen thus far. I'm not even sure I'm rendering all of the base parts because sometimes it glitches out a little bit, but as you can see, if there's one city in No Man's Sky that gives some proper cyberpunk vibes, this has to be the one for it. And specifically because this base has a lot of verticality, you will see that there are multiple layers over here going all the way into the underground, not just on the surface. So when you actually go to the lower levels and look out and to all of the bridges and all of the larger buildings in the background, it gives you this sense of scale that, yeah, I mean, no other build has ever given me in all the 5 years I've been covering exclusively base builds in No Man's Sky. So this achieves that for me, and obviously it makes use of a lot of glitch building, but not quite as much as some of the others. Like, this is something that I believe could be achievable by normal builders as well. You just have to put in a ton of time and effort into it. But this is just the outside part of it. If you go to this platform just a little bit further down the alleyway, you're going to notice that there are a number of teleporters, and this is actually part of the secondary base. So upon taking this route, I was brought in this kind of underground facility, which kind of looked like some kind of deposit. So what I did is I followed it all the way into the back. I didn't even know that it expands for this much. And once I reached the opposite end, I was just blown away that there's actually another city right below the planet's crust. So obviously there are even more tunnels over here. It's highly interconnected, so this isn't just some amateur build. It's actually somebody who knows what they're doing, because this kind of design isn't easy to wrap your mind around. Like, I got so lost over here, it took me quite a while to actually get out of it. So hopefully in the future there's a way to actually populate these kinds of builds with moving NPCs. I think that that would be the last part that this whole setup needs to actually make it feel a lot more alive. But that pretty much concludes today's video with the top builds. Obviously, there are many others that may be even more ambitious than these, but they may not be public, specifically because of that reason I told you about. Lots of folks coming in and overwriting bases by placing their own bases. So guys, whenever you visit these locations, don't just build your own bases there. Just go at the space station, set it as favorite, and you can just visit this back whenever you want to. But that pretty much concludes today's video. Let me know down below in the comments which one of these builds was your favorite, and I will see you guys in the next video.